All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is Willie T with the Overtime College Football Podcast. And tonight we're going to be starting our conference breakdown series where we discuss a different conference pretty much every day leading up to the start of the season. Tonight we will be discussing and breaking down the ACC. So, Mr. Andy, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Anytime I get to look at the ACC with a critical eye, it happens to be a good day because there's not too much to look at where you're not criticizing the ACC. So I've actually made some bold predictions where the ACC has a new face in the college football playoff. I think Miami will be the surprise team this season. And I know you have an opinion on that one that I'll let you get started with.
Yeah, so you've picked Miami to kind of be the dark horse, the front runner in the ACC. I don't necessarily see that happening. I know they returned De'Aaron King, and they have a pretty good defense and an okay offense. However, I don't see them being able to compete with North Carolina and or Clemson in the ACC. Given we will have to see how it plays out. North Carolina returns Sam Howell, loses two starting running backs on the offensive side of the ball, and returns an okay defense. So I can see them competing with North Carolina somewhat. However, I think Clemson's the big boy, the
Okay
undefeated.
defense. You think that Miami had an okay defense, and they're returning 12 of 21 starters in total. They're going to be dominant up front, just like they have been. They are the turnover chain originator for a reason. They have a culture built on turnovers. Every bit of my projection is not based on what Miami is, but what Clemson is not this season. In the season where Clemson has to replace 90% of its offensive production from last season, where they have to replace a few key starters on defense, I think there is a little bit of a void there in the ACC to be filled. And it could be by North Carolina. North Carolina, in my opinion, still needs a little bit of time to marinate in that Mac Brown system to be lethal. And I think that they'll have a couple of losses compared to Miami having one loss at the beginning of the season.
See, I can agree with your point that Clemson loses roughly 90% of his offensive production, especially in Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence. However, we are reloading with DJ Uiagalelei. We also have, who will probably be a freshman phenom, Will Shipley, as well as a strong running back room with Kobe Pace, Lynn J. Dixon. Justin Ross is returning to action after a year off. So I think we'll be fine. And our defense is yet again going to be one of our strengths as we return every starter except for Darian Kendrick, who was released from the team and goes to Georgia. So I still feel Clemson being the front runner in the ACC, given you do make a somewhat convincing argument that there may be some room for competition, albeit I think Clemson's still the top dog.
Because let's be truthful, I think both of these teams will be – Clemson might be walking into the ACC championship with already one loss to Georgia. Let's not chalk that one up as a win automatically to the Fighting Tigers just because they're Clemson and they've been good for the past few years. I think there are some big questions. Uiagalelei did great against Notre Dame, but he didn't win the game. He was no Trevor Lawrence who was able to open up the field dynamically with his legs and his arm. He was a pocket passer who was able to pick apart. That did one thing. It closed the run game completely for Etienne. So that was Etienne being shut out. How does it look for Shipley, a true freshman, stepping into that role against an elite defense in Georgia?
We will see. I think Shipley may play a smaller role in the Georgia game. I think one of the keys that will be different in that game in particular is that DJ was hurt during the Notre Dame game last year, had a shoulder injury, which kind of prevented him from running for most of the game and did close that off for Travis Etienne.
Your shoulder prevents you from running. Your shoulder prevents you from running?
Shoulder injury, you have your freshman quarterback.
If I'm not mistaken, it was towards the end of the game that DJ got hurt of the Notre Dame game. It wasn't that he was going into that game. That just sounds like a shit fucking take that you're trying to just whiff over a Clemson loss with.
No, he injured his shoulder in the Boston College game. I get it. Excuses are excuses. we still ran him when we needed to in the Notre Dame game, but I'm saying I think the quarterback run game will be more prevalent. Given that's neither here nor there, we're more discussing the ACC tonight, but let's get on with it.
Okay, so my number 2 team was Clemson, and we've clearly talked about Clemson a little bit. We've talked about North Carolina, so let's talk about an underdog team, someone that you just see coming out of nowhere being the most improved ACC team. Dark horse, most improved. We're not talking to win the conference dark horse. We're talking to be like, man, that team was good for what they were a year ago.
My dark horse team, being that I think I know yours, and I'm not going to take that one from you. I can see Boston College having an okay year. Second year under the coordinator from Ohio State that took the head coaching job there. They have shown some flashes last season that they were on the right path, and I think possibly they could come out and surprise some people this year.
I mean, Phil Dracovic is a phenomenal quarterback. I mean, I ask myself every night before I go to bed, what if? What if they would have stayed with Phil Dracovic instead of Ian Book? Notre Dame could have had a national championship, and that's how good of a quarterback Boston College has. So I don't think it's a terrible pick. Another year underneath the system can't get worse. Knock on wood for Boston College fans.
And I think we saw a good deal of athleticism out of Jurkovec. He can make the long throw. He can make some plays with his legs when necessary. And as he becomes more cohesive with his wide receiver core, we could see a much improved Boston College this year. Who is your dark horse pick for the coming season?
So I'm looking at Florida State and just thinking the team might not be deep. The team might not have the opportunity or the talent to compete for a national championship or a New Year's Six bowl. But the further they get away from Willie Targent, the better they become. I just think it's underemphasized with how terrible of a head coach Targent was. I remember back in 2016, whenever Brian Kelly had the terrible year at Notre Dame, and the word around campus was we had to get in Targent. He's killing it at his small school. Next thing you know, Florida State gets some, Notre Dame keeps Kelly, and I get to sleep peacefully at night now.
Yeah, so when Taggart was hired, Florida State was already on a bit of a slide. And then when we saw him hired, we just saw it completely implode on itself. Given they have – what's the coach from Memphis' name? I can't ever remember his name.
I cannot remember off the top of my head. I want to say Mike Norvell, but I know that's an NFL head coach.
Nope, it is Mike Norvell. They have Mike Norvell. He struggled somewhat last year, especially amidst COVID and cancellation of games, but he was a great coach at Memphis, and we'll see if he's got his guys turned around. Hopefully he can get them on the right track because he has a big hill to climb.
Of course. I mean, Florida State is expected to win national championships. This will be an emotional season for Florida State, too, losing longtime head coach Bobby Bowden.
Yes, it will be. We're all saddened by the loss of the legendary coach Bobby Bowden, and it may just add a little bit of extra fuel to the fire going forward in this season. First week, Florida State plays Notre Dame. How do you see that game playing out?
Notre Dame's going to win. I don't see many situations where Florida State has the manpower to match up with Notre Dame. Notre Dame, in my opinion, is a dark horse national championship team, not national quarterfinal team. I'm talking this Notre Dame team could be the best, but I'm not talking about Notre Dame because Notre Dame's only got half a toe in this game. But Florida State needs the depth to compete with Notre Dame, and they just don't have the depth.
I can agree with that one. I see Notre Dame not having much of a problem handling Florida State in the first game of the season. I guess also in the ACC, who's your biggest?
Who's my biggest what? No, go ahead.
If we're moving on, who is your biggest flub? Who's your biggest loser? Who's the most overhyped coming into the ACC this year? Who do you see having a fall from grace, so to speak, that the media is pumping up early in the preseason?
Unpopular answer, North Carolina. So I
What
believe North Carolina is going to be the same that they were last year. Pretty good team, but they're being hyped as a national contender. I think this is a damn good football team. It's a good football team. One that I wouldn't want to have to face every week, but they're not a national contender. They're not beating the Alabamas consistently, the Clemsons, the Ohio States. They just lost, same as Clemson, the majority of their offensive firepower. They're replacing, I believe, at least one receiver, 2,000-yard running backs, but they are bringing back the quarterback to spearhead the game, and we'll see how he does, but he's got some tools to replace. For me, it's a prove it before I believe it situation with North Carolina. It's a lot easier to go from a 6-win team to a 9-win team than it is a 9-win team to a 12-win team.
You make some really good points, and similarly, my team that you love is Miami. I see Miami having another lackluster year. Given they won't do terrible, but I think they're slightly overhyped. We won't see D'Eriq King do anything too crazy, too special to put them on that next level, and they'll kind of come out middle of the pack in the ACC, probably behind. If I had to rank them, Clemson, North Carolina, then Miami. So third in the ACC. Not terrible, but not living up to the hype and expectations that some people, including you, are placing on them. So in the
do you want to
same
hear a
note,
stat that's going to blow your mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
D'Eriq King, this is the first time in his collegiate career he will be playing under the same offensive coordinator twice. What will consistency do for D'Eriq King? He's already a damn good quarterback 1 year into a system every time. What will some familiarity do to his game? You want to say regression, but I doubt it.
We'll have to see. That first game of the year versus Bama is going to be a tough one and put to the test some of his improvements he's made as a quarterback while at Miami. So I guess we'll see.
One thing I'm going to be interested to see, I want to see how that defense comes out against a freshman quarterback, Bryce Love. Because if I can guess anything,
Bryce
Manny
Young.
Diaz will have Bryce Young. Thank you. Will have some tricks up his sleeve. Manny Diaz will not let that one be an easy win. But then again, it is a Nick Saban coach team. I think it'll be a 10-point loss, but we'll keep them in the national conversation.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can for sure, and we're talking about the ACC, so I won't expand too much, but I don't expect Bryce Young to come out and be a superstar first game of the year either for Alabama. I think Alabama fans themselves may have some questions, even if they win the game, but they've got a young quarterback. So there's probably not too much concern on that side, but I don't necessarily expect this to be a crazy blowout per se, especially if they can rattle Bryce Young quick and early. So moving on in the same
that would be interesting to see. They had the talents on the defensive line to do it. Alabama's replacing a good bit up front. That can be an upset watch.
It'll be one of those games I have circled on my calendar. So as far as the ACC, who is your leading MVP for the ACC this year?
So here is my highly controversial Will Shipley. I think by mid-season, Will Shipley will take over that Clemson offense. And I think that will propel him. If not, if Will Shipley doesn't get it going, look for Phil Dracovic. I think he's going to do some beautiful things up there at Boston College that he could have done at Notre Dame, if only.
Yeah, I like Phil Dracovic pick, and I've thought about it. I've debated about it. And I think, even though I don't want to, I'm going to go with Sam Howell. I think despite what the rest of his team may look like, he's going to help propel them to some wins. Depending on how their season goes and how the rest of the unit plays, maybe a lot of wins or maybe a few wins. But I think either way, he's going to be an integral part of that team and what they do on the field this season.
Interesting to see. North Carolina is probably going to be one of the more well-coached teams. It'll be interesting to see how much they can put together, though.
Yeah,
Will it
we
be the
know that
Matt Brown of the last 10 years at Texas?
they seem to be always missing a piece. So it'll be interesting to see if they can string together a good run of games this year and play good ball on both sides, and see if
I
they
mean,
can throw
game
their
to
name at the
watch.
hat at the end of the season.
The game to watch for North Carolina is at Notre Dame. If they can manage that upset, that will be one that would propel them into the spotlight. They've got to only be a one-loss team if they beat Notre Dame. They beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame and they're a one-loss team. I think they're in.
Yeah, as of now, that's a top 10 matchup, and that will be one that I'm sure the whole college football universe will be closely watching if they're still both undefeated going into that game, because that will have serious playoff uh, potential if for either
Implications.
team. Yeah, there we go. I'm having a brain fart.
I mean, it'll be interesting to see. What I'll go ahead and say to all of you is if you have anything that you think we said wrong, go ahead and attack us on Twitter. Go ahead and spit out that handle for us there, Willie T.
Yeah, so if you want to talk some trash to us or tell us we've got wonderful takes, great takes, you love every one of them, you can hit us up on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @OvertimeCFP. Our Twitter name is the Overtime College Football Podcast. Hit us up there. You can catch updates to when we drop our new video, and or you can see us talking trash to everybody in the college football universe. So yeah, hit us up there. Furthermore, if you want to like and subscribe our YouTube channel, that is the Overtime College Football Podcast. Hit us up there, or whether if you want to send us some hate mail, some fan mail, you can contact us at overtimecfp@gmail.com.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned all this week for our conference breakdowns. Make sure you like and subscribe and hit us up on Twitter.
Yeah, guys, we thank you and we appreciate it, and we look forward to bringing you our breakdown of the SEC conference come next episode. Thanks and good night.
Number one is AAC because we need to somewhat go alphabetically.
All right, fair. We'll do the AAC next.